Again, thank you to ZIZO Technologies for doing this presentation. We really appreciate what you're doing for the Buffalo startup community. Everybody, I want to let you know that this is more of an interactive presentation. We are joined by Jimmy Chebat and Megan Baldy. Jimmy Chebat is a multiple-time founder, and he is now finding ZIZO Technologies. And then we have Megan. Megan is Jimmy's assistant. She's a great person, helps out dogs and plants trees, all great things to know. Jimmy also has a gym in his office. Everybody needs to know this. This is part of his success. But Jimmy, I'd love to let you take over and I will stop talking.
All right, wonderful. Thank you for the introduction, Brandon. And I believe the proper term is founded, since it's already been up and running here. And Megan, she's a little bit more than just my assistant. I think with most startups, anybody who is part of a startup, you're wearing many different hats. And so she's community manager, marketing director, salesman, she gets coffee, she'll do anything that's necessary. So kudos to Megan. I don't want to short her on her title in our organization, but thanks again, Brandon. So today, my conversation with everybody is going to be about 5 things every founder should know. And I kind of want to peel that back a little bit and talk a little bit about, it's more going to be about my experiences and 5 things that helped me become successful. And I want to share that personally, my personal experiences with you guys to see if hopefully there's multiple takeaways that you'll be able to utilize and help you become successful or maintain your current success. Before I get started, just a little bit more about myself. As Brandon had said, I founded multiple companies. My first company was back in, I won't say the year, but I was 19 years old. I had, I guess this dates it. I've got 25 years of experience. I've started 17 different companies during that time in multiple spaces and industries. Technology is really where my passion is. I got involved in call centers back in 2008 and did that for 13 years. In finance as well, the food service, opened a couple restaurants and the entertainment business as well. I have a passion for innovation and business. And I think like most entrepreneurs, we're problem solvers. I think part of the curse is that when you see a problem that you feel you can solve, you start a business around it. So that's been part of my experience here. ZIZO Technologies is the current company I am primarily focused on. We've got 3 other operations that we operate here. I've done a wonderful job of building a team that can run those operations that I can focus on ZIZO. We are a startup that launched in 2020. It's a workforce gamification platform. We have very high aspirations to revolutionize workforce management by adding gaming elements. So we want to make work fun. So when you come in, it's almost like playing a video game. It's a very immersive experience. It's going to just take the mundane tasks and just make it fun. And our value proposition is about increasing employment engagement to help reduce the attrition rates and then increase productivity. So that is me. Enough about me. We're going to get started in our presentation, and I'm going to talk first. And Brandon, I don't know if you had said this. You had mentioned that this is going to be an interactive kind of presentation here, and we're going to take questions in between each of the slides here. So please, as you're hearing things, if it prompts a question in your head, just put it in the Q&A section. Megan and Brandon will pick some out, and then I don't know if Brandon can allow you to talk, we can have a conversation. If not, we'll do it through the Q&A. But the first thing I want to talk about, and I think one of basic elements of almost anybody's personal success, is that hard work beats talent. And it's not going to be something that you can teach. You either have it or you don't. And I use the words, you have to just put in the work. And it's one thing that I've been able to do consistently, way beyond even before my first startup. I just worked hard in everything that I did. And I think actions over words are also important. You don't want to just talk about it. You want to be about it, and you want to lead by example. I'm one of the first people to work and one of the last to leave. And that's been that way throughout my entire career. And part of being able to do that is to live a healthy and responsible lifestyle. I'm not a partier. I think if you're going to be, a successful entrepreneur, networking is an important part of, being in the community, and networking and meeting new people, especially in the business sector, or if you're doing any startup and capital raises, you got to get your name out there. But you got to do it with a balance. Everything in moderation is important. So living a responsible and healthy lifestyle is part of my keys to my success. Is it allowed me to be effective when I come to work, to put in the time, to lead by example. And, I haven't met many people that lived an aggressively party type style that have been able to sustain long-term success. And even after experiencing success, you want to still maintain a level of responsible lifestyle, but to each their own. I don't judge. But working hard and working smart is another thing that, comes up when when people talk about, hard work. It's like, okay, what's more important, working hard or working smart? To me, they're both equally important. In the beginning, as you start up or when you're first starting your career, I don't know that working smart is going to be easy for you, because you're still learning how to work and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So you really have to just put in the time and effort. One thing that's the best educator is the experience. I don't care how many degrees you have, how long you go to school for, nothing beats real life experience. And the more you do it, the more hours you put in, you're going to have that experience, and you're going to learn a lot. And then you start to learn how to work smart. And then you always then at that point, you want to be able to do both. So that is my first topic. Hopefully there's some people that have questions about hard work and that how it's always going to beat out talent.
Really just been enjoying everything that you're saying. I do have one question for you. And
sure.
When you were 19, you were on your first startup journey. How many hours do you think you put in a week?
Man, again, this was my first company, and I'll be honest with you, my first company, we created very, very little revenue, right? And I quit my job, and so I focused on this. And when I tell you, I was literally living off of my change jar. That's not a joke. But I put in almost every waking hour, planning, building, developing, the model and the business and networking and trying to launch this campaign. So I can't recall the number of hours, but it was well past 60 hours a week. I think I lived and breathed what I was doing, and a lot of lessons from that experience. And again, that is the time that you need to put in order to gain experience. Like if you're half-assing it, you're not going to learn much. It's going to take you time. And then time, to me, is the most precious commodity that you can never get back. So, put that effort in, put that investment in early if you could.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Megan, anything before we move on?
Yeah, I have plenty. I wanted to give everyone else an opportunity to jump in. So I would love to kind of hear you speak a little more on how you set an example here at the office on being a hard worker, and like you said, being the first one to work, first one to leave, but also I know that work-life balance is really important to you. So I'd like to hear how you kind of handle showing that balance to your employees and how you handle that balance on your own.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very unique situation. Maybe it's not so unique as much nowadays, but I am a divorced dad, so I'm a single parent. And, so I split custody with my ex-wife at 50-50. And so for me, I'm always showing up at the same time every morning. There's, when I'm dropping my kids off at school, I come in right after that. But when I have my kids, I mean, I leave at a reasonable hour. I leave at 5 o'clock, and that's my responsibility, my commitment to my family that I want to make. And then, but when I don't have the kids, I'm here late. That's where I put my time in. And so, for families that don't have that luxury, maybe it's coming in a little bit earlier, staying late when necessary. To me, working hard isn't necessarily about only time. I think you have to be able to complete tasks. I think you can actually measure work effort, by, simply just creating tasks in something like Planner, which is an Office application, or there's some other applications that you can measure and set your task and complete the task. But work-life balance is important, and I talk a lot to my staff. I don't want burnout. I think, when you're younger, you have that extra energy that you can put in. You have less responsibilities at home if you don't have a family. But as you get older, you definitely want to, have that work-life balance. At least that's what's important for me. But as a startup, sometimes you got to just make that investment.
And that brings us to Adam's question. Sorry, Brandon, I kind of jumped in over you. But Adam asked in the Q&A section, if you have any additional thoughts on emphasizing hard work while avoiding burnout. So why don't you just go a little deeper into that?
Oh, great segue. I didn't even see that question come in. So burnout is a mindset, right? And it's, Brandon, you had mentioned, I have a gym in my office, and, and I put that gym in my office. We were talking before this, I put it in actually before I was successful. I had available space, and to me, personal well-being, physical well-being, is directly related to mental well-being. And so you need outlets. And so again, when you try to measure how much work is too much work, it's really, what is your bandwidth? What is your capacity for being able to put in work? I get energized by good work. If you love what you're doing, I don't think you can ever burn out. If what you're doing is mundane, it's repetitive, again, we're trying to do some things to offset that with ZIZO, with gamifying work and making it a little bit funner. And I used to do that even when I was younger, and just challenge myself to do better than what I did yesterday or what I did an hour ago. So burnout is more of a mindset. And again, if you're doing something that you don't enjoy, you're gonna get to that burnout much sooner. If you love what you're doing, I don't think I've ever been burnt out. And I've spent a ton of hours, well over 10,000 hours, doing the things that I love doing in multiple business sectors. So again, find an outlet, be able to purge some of that stress, because really stress is what leads to burnout. And again, if you don't love what you're doing, I think you need to change it and get into something that you really enjoy. And I don't think you'll ever experience burnout.
Awesome. So I just have probably one more question on this topic, unless anyone else does. And on that same burnout, I think a big factor in that is learning to work smarter, which is something that you focus a lot on. Can you just touch on that a little bit deeper? Like, how do you typically identify when it's time to evaluate how to work smarter instead of working harder? And what are some techniques you use to do that?
So working smart, again, I think you need some time. I use this saying that you got to get your hands in the dirt and manually touch every single thing that you're doing and get your hands dirty. And that's from an operational standpoint. And you can't really start to work smarter until you understand every little micro detail of what you and your organization have to do on a day-to-day basis. We have a process here that we call DEAL, DEAL, that we do on a periodic basis, where we evaluate our tasks, those tasks being repetitive tasks, things that we do on a daily basis, a weekly basis, recurring tasks. And we identify which ones that we can delegate, right? If I'm doing something that I really don't need to be doing, that I can delegate to somebody else, I do that. And it's part of helping, the promotions of people coming up through your ranks. The E stands for eliminate. There are things that we do that, we inherited from somebody else, or, somebody on your team may be doing something that, they took over for somebody else that may no longer have any purpose. they did it. They didn't understand why they were doing it. It was just something they did. Maybe they pulled a report. Maybe they matched something else. And now it's no longer required. So, some things you just, you look at it and you say, you know what, we don't need to do that anymore. Stop doing that. That's no longer necessary. The A is for automate. There's a lot of automation tools now. And, we use Microsoft Office, and they have a tool called Power Automate. All of our documents, all of our applications are in the cloud. And so we can do a lot of the things that we used to do manually and automate those tasks, through the Power Automate tool. And there's a lot of automation tools out there. So we identify areas where we can save time. So a lot of people may think, man, computers and machines are going to replace me. And that's not our purpose. When you open up that time, what it does is it allows for somebody that has a higher rank than you to delegate down, and it makes you more promotable. So, that's the way that we look at working smarter, is how do we use technology to buy our time back and then apply that time to more advanced stuff.
Those were great points. Thank you. I don't think we have any other open questions.
Okay, wonderful. Well, let's move on to the next topic. Let's go here. All right, so the next topic is going to be about always be learning. It's something that, I used to say to myself that when you think you know everything, that's the beginning of the end. And I'll be honest with you, when I was really young, in my late teens, even early 20s, I thought I was the smartest person that I knew. And I always thought I was the smartest person in every room I went into. It's the ego. And, my birthday was in January, which is close to New Year's Eve. And I would use those 2 dates to reflect and plan forward. And I would always look back at, all the things I was able to achieve the previous year, and then, really pat myself on the back of how smart I am. And, and then I would actually kind of laugh at my previous self that was like, oh, he thought he was smart, And then I realized that I was continuing to laugh at myself every year. I was like, holy crap, I'm always going to be smarter. And that was just a light bulb that says, hey, be open. Like, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I'm sure you guys have heard that quote before. You want to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, who are better, who are more knowledgeable than you, that somebody that you can learn from. I took it upon myself in the beginning is to read a lot of books. And, I put some of the books here that, really made an impact for me early on, which is Good to Great by Jim Collins, and then Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Those 2 things had a profound impact on me early. And then, as I started to really dive into some specific areas of interest, I started reading books like Hooked, How to Build a Habit Forming Product, and Reality is Broken, which helped me kind of evolve the product that I'm working on now, which is ZIZO. So find different ways and always be learning. When I say always be learning, I'm talking about look for opportunities every single day. So whether it's books, groups were a great way for me to kind of learn from other people at my level. So Vistage is a CEO peer group that I highly recommend. I did it for 3 years with them. And I mean, just like with everything else, I think there's a shelf life, where things kind of start to become repetitive. So that's another recommendation. Switch it up, change things up. Don't always do the same things. But Visage is a CEO peer group. They match you with people who have, are running the same size type companies. They bring in world-class speakers. They host great events, but the best part is, the roundtable discussions that you have with people at your level that you can share problems. Everybody is having the same type of problems, and by talking them out and helping other people, you kind of master what you know, and it helps you learn new things from people that are dealing with the same type of problem. So masterminds, groups, I'm part of one right now. Which is great because it's actually, I'm probably one of the older people in the group. And it's great to be able to share my experiences with them, but also learn from them because they just have amazing minds. Mentorships, there's a personal mentorship that I do with a student, who's part of the Buffalo Prep. Again, trying to give back to the community and help somebody. Like, if I wish I had a mentor when I was growing up, somebody who's, had some success and can guide me, along the right path. And, I've got a great protege in that program as well. But also in business, if you're a seasoned, excuse me, if you're a seasoned veteran, you've been around for a long time, and you have a lot to share, find a protege, find somebody that you can help share some of your experiences. What it does is sometimes it reinforces some of the things that you should be doing, that maybe you have stopped doing. And, oh, I used to do that, and I'm telling, this person how to do it. Maybe I should just, take my own advice and do it as well. So mentorships, I think, are a great way to help you kind of get back to what's important and what you used to do when you were in your early stages of your career. Learning apps, I used Luminosity, Elevate, Verbal Advantage. I think Elevate is the most current one that I've been using. These are a lot of mental exercises, and there are things that help you develop certain areas in your brain, just like a gym. A physical gym helps you your muscles have to be exercised in order to stay in shape. Your brain is one of the biggest muscles, if not the biggest muscle in your body. It needs to be exercised. So by exercising it, even 5-10 minutes a day helps keep you sharp. And I think that's important when trying to, again, continue to develop your mind. You want to keep it at its peak fitness level as well. Podcasts, there's a ton of them. There's hundreds of them. Gary V's is got a great one. I love TED Talks. I like to consolidate my TED Talks, especially if I'm driving. There's an NPR TED radio hour that, they take a topic and they take multiple speakers and they kind of break it down and, and get really granular with the details. But learn from everything. I mean, there's every place. I mean, with ZIZO, for example, when we decided that we're going to take this app to the next level and for gamification, I have a 14-year-old son who's a gamer. I sat there and I watched him play for hours and hours and hours. And I looked at his habits and I looked at the user experience and the UI and what games he's playing and why and I asked him a lot of questions. And, he was a big part of how it helped me develop the application, because it's the younger generations that we're targeting, and I need to know how their mind works. And know your craft. Whatever it is that you're doing, you're probably really good at, but you're probably not the best at. And you should always strive to be the best at it. That means there's other people doing the same thing you're doing. Go learn from them. Always stay on top of it. With the way the world works now and how fast things change and how fast information changes hands, there's always opportunities for you to learn. So those are really, I guess, some of my points in terms of how I'm always learning. And I think if you just budget time in your day, every day, to whether it's read a book, join a group, find a protege, or even find a mentor, get a mentor if you're young, download one of these apps and, exercise your mind daily and listen to some podcasts, but there's always an opportunity to learn.
This is a great place to segue. But before we get to the mentor question, what was the Ellen deal? Was it learn?
Oh, I'm sorry. I left that out. Leave it alone.
Leave it
Not
alone.
everything needs to change. The L is, so delegate, eliminate, automate, and just leave it alone. It doesn't have to do, just continue doing what you're doing. Thanks for reminding me.
And then that goes to our next question. Where can someone find mentor outside of their personal network? And do you have any recommendations on where to look?
From business mentorships, obviously Google has everything. You can go on Google and just Google mentorships. We found mentorship, Ned Renzi. Actually, I've still worked with mentors. Megan, what's the name of the group from Ned?
Enjoy the work.
I'm sorry?
Enjoy the work.
Enjoy the work. Sorry. Yes. So they're a group out of San Francisco, and they have mentors all over the country. But I went online and I found somebody that I wanted to work with, and some of them they're free. This was a paid service. So I paid to actually work with this individual. So usually when you're paying for something, you're going to get top class talents. and with real high level experience in the direction that I was going. I didn't have experience in launching a high level B2B application. I wanted to tap into somebody's mind. And that's the resource that I found, which it's Enjoy the Work. And again, you have to be approved. There's a process, and again, I don't have anything other than Enjoy the Work that I would go to for cheaper. And I think maybe even more effective is a Vistage group or a mastermind group. I think you're going to get multiple mentors with that. So if you're going to pay for something, I would recommend finding a group to be a part of. And one of the other things about being part of a group is that, if you're a resourceful person, imagine multiplying yourself by 10. There's 10 other people who are equally resourceful, but from different perspectives. And you can get to things pretty quickly, whether it's contacts, a resource for learning, helping you solve a problem. They're very resourceful people, just like you are. So I would recommend joining a group before paying for a mentor. But if you can find a mentor for free, I think maybe UB may have a mentorship program as well. But yeah, there's a lot of different places that you can go for mentorship.
Just from my experience as well, apply to On Deck. They have different types of mentors depending on what you're looking for. And then I know you said specifically out of your personal network, but going to these networking events, finding the people that, you're looking for and actually directly asking them, will you mentor me? Will you teach me this skill? Come clear and with your objectives, laid out, and let them know the purpose. There's a saying that some people have that where, there's no agenda, there's no like attenda. Some people like saying that, but yeah, I'll stop talking.
I like when you talk, Brandon. You can keep talking. Any other questions? Okay, wonderful. I think that one's an easy one there. Always be learning. It's very important. Number 3, be fiscally responsible. Now I'm going to sound like a dad here, where I'm just preaching, but I think it's very, very critical. If you're a founder, if you're an owner of a business, that fiscal responsibility extends, beyond you, beyond your personal, beyond your business finances, because the impact is going to impact everybody in your organization. And, it's pretty obvious, but I think sometimes you just need to hear it. From the personal side, this is something that's really, really hard for people to do, is don't live beyond your means, especially early on. Like when I talked to you about, I lived, from my change jar, it was really hard at that time. And it was, it required a lot of discipline for me not to go out when my friends are going out, or, go buy my beer from the store and catch a buzz before going to the bar. I think we've all done that. But, don't live beyond your means. Even when you experience success early, again, try to maintain a level of life. Just don't spend beyond what you can make, even if you're making it. So keep it somewhat, and don't try to keep up with appearances. I think that's the main reason why people do it. As you start to evolve and grow, you're starting to hang out with more successful people, which is a really important thing to do. I think that's going to help drive and motivate you to become better. But don't go out there and buy that Mercedes just to be able to drive that car and look just as good as everybody else. Wait for your turn. I mean, the moment will come and when it came for me, I waited a little bit, before, I knew that I had, the savings, and, I had everything in terms of long-term retirement. And my biggest investment I make is in me. And so I know that as an entrepreneur, there are times that you're going to have some bad months, and you better be ready to maintain, financial well-being for your organization. So don't have or develop expensive bad habits. I mean, this seems an obvious one. Don't do cocaine, guys. It's very expensive, I guess. No, I've seen a lot of people experience success and, whether it's gambling, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, and they just burn through their money really quickly. And then they burn through their company's money just as quickly because they think it's theirs. And, it has a profound impact on not just their lives, but everybody else's lives. And so be disciplined, and, nobody's going to judge you on how you live your life, but just be very cognizant of the impact it's not going to have just on you and your family, but on your business as well. Again, it requires discipline and some sacrifice. You're going to have to give up a lot. FOMO is bullshit, and excuse my language, but this whole fear of missing out, I got to go do this for the gram and post it. It's, look, at this level, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Like, what you do for yourself. You don't do it for anybody else. You do it for your family. You do it because it makes you feel good, not because it makes you look good. Maybe when you're younger, and, but try to get that maturity level early. Just don't care what people think about you. Care about what your family thinks about you. Care about what your friends think about you. Build a strong business, and let them be proud. And, it may take you a year or two before you're able to, but you'll get there. So just be responsible on the personal side. And on the business side, it's really important that you know your books. Study them. Most entrepreneurs, they're really good at something, and usually it's not accounting. They're not accountants, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't know accounting. Okay, there's simple 101. Know the simple formula that net income is a product of revenues minus expenses. That's number one. And then break down your revenues, where they're coming from. Find ways to increase those, break down your expenses, see where you're spending money, and understand your expenses, and see where the areas that you can cut expensive if necessary. And maintain accountability. Whoever's handling your finances, whoever's spending the money, you have to have some level of accountability. And, even a checks and balances is definitely a must, but also maybe, having some form of approval for certain expenditures. So you don't just allow people just to spend money and give out, copies of credit cards to everybody. We do that on our organization. We have spending limits where everything needs to be approved. It comes through my phone app that, hey, Megan is spending this much money. Do you want to approve it? Sure. Yes, I've authorized that. But don't be reactive to this. Be very proactive and put measures in place and systems and processes in place to protect the organization from you and your team. So you are also an employee of your organization. You just because you are the majority shareholder or maybe the only shareholder, it doesn't exempt you from being accountable to your organization. And again, sometimes when you'll have to make some tough decisions. If you're staying on top of it, you won't have to make as many tough decisions, meaning you don't have to lay people off. If you know what's coming, if you're able to forecast and plan ahead and cut the costs when you need to prior, then those tough decisions will be less frequent. And then the final point is you're going to always take the first pay cut. Always. I don't think in my entire 25-year history of hiring anybody that I've ever cut anybody's pay. It doesn't mean that I haven't laid people off. Those are tough decisions, but I've never told anybody, hey, I need you to stay and do the same job, maybe even better, but for less pay. That's me. I take that first pay cut, and you need to be able to take that first pay cut. So plan ahead, be responsible, and nobody will have to take a pay cut. You guys all get raises. Any questions?
I have questions if no one else does, so I'll jump in with mine, and maybe some more will come in through the Q&A. But my biggest question is, what resources did you use or can you recommend for getting a better understanding of accounting? Like you mentioned, a lot of founders don't come with that background. So how would you suggest kind of getting your feet wet and learning that way you're starting with a good baseline?
Well, I mean, first, before you learn, I mean, unless you're going to do your own bookkeeping, which I don't recommend, there's a lot of resources out there that, whether it's Upwork, where you can hire a freelancer online or talk to your tax accountant and they'll make recommendations for local bookkeepers that, again, they don't have to come in and work for you full time. They can do it once a week. They can do it twice a month. They can do it once a month, even depending on the number of transactions you have, but hire somebody to do your books. And then when you're, when you're working with that person directly, understand how a general ledger works. This is where you're keeping accounting of every single transaction. And then understand how each account, what it means. And because you have to itemize, how you want to identify each expense. What is it under? Is it under cost of goods sold? Is it under maintenance? Is it under, all these different things? So ask the questions to the resource that's doing your books. That's the first place I would go to, is work with the people directly associated with your organization that are handling your books. Again, there are so many different resources online, whether it's LinkedIn, they have a lot of courses. Go to YouTube, you can YouTube anything. Give me accounting 101, there's 100 different resources, but I would start with the people who are handling your books directly, because you want to be able to analyze your own set of books and understand them. So if you're helping with setting them up, and you're understanding what goes where and how that impacts the bottom line, I think that's the best way to get a firm understanding of, general accounting.
We don't have any more questions coming in the Q&A right now. So I think my only other question on this topic here is if you can just touch on a little bit how you prioritize expenses and how you've had to make tough decisions. So I know, like with us at ZIZO, there's certain things like we have to be very conscious of what we spend our money on when as a startup. So if you could just kind of touch on that and your approach to that.
Mm-hmm. What was the first part of that question?
Yeah, how do you prioritize your expenses? So like, for instance, how do you decide what you're going to spend money on over something else when you have limited budgets?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one is payroll, right? You gotta maintain your number one asset, which is your human resources. So that's priority number one. Obviously, you got to work in a building, so paying your rent, your lease, your mortgage, whatever that may be, to make sure that you have a space to work in. So that's 1 and 2, or 1A, 1B. But as you start to go down, it really depends on your objectives, right? I'll give an example of something that we recently did here at ZIZO, and which was a very, very tough decision to make. But, it was something that came with a little bit of a compromise as well, where, we had shifted from, purely a development. We were launching our product into the marketplace. So we had commercialized our product. We'd spent, well over $1 million on developing this application. Now we needed to get it out to the marketplace. We still had a roadmap for feature development, but we had enough to go to market with it. And we had a budget for our monthly burn rate. So we decided, hey, we can't add more to this budget. So what do? And what we did is we decided to downsize our development team. And that was a very difficult thing to do and a decision to make. And we had some contractors that we needed to kind of put on hold and, and shift some of that money over to sales and marketing and run some campaigns so we can get leads and close those leads and, get some revenues in, which is obviously the purpose of the organization. But what I did is, talking to my CTO, which nobody wants to lose anybody on the team, but when it's a direct report to you, it's more personal. And he took it somewhat personally, but he understood it's a business decision and he agreed with the business decision. And I said, look, here's our goal. Our goal is to get, 4 paying customers on the platform, or I forget, there was one other target. Do you remember it, Megan?
I think it was a specific monthly income. It was like 4 small customers or 1 big customer. 1
big customer, yep. And so as long as we were able to get that target, even if the revenues didn't start generating, but as long as we had the contracts, then we can rehire them. And we had a target date of less than 60 days. So we asked the contractors to kind of, take on temporary roles, and so we don't lose them. But those are kind of tough decisions that you have to make to kind of shift based on your priorities within your organization. And you have a plan, and I'll tell you, 90% of the time the plan doesn't go according to your original plan. So be ready to be agile and just shift and make those changes and make those decisions, and also prepare your entire team for that. And the more frequently you're reviewing, and I'm transparent with the finances with a lot of my team, maybe not everybody, but especially the high level, so they understand we have budgets, we have targets, we have goals, and this is where you are and this is where you need to be, and you're accountable for your department's expenses. And why are we spending this? Are we still using that? In a day and age where with SaaS, people forget what they're paying for. It just hits your account. Do a monthly review. When you get your credit card statement, that's another thing I would definitely take away from this. Do a full review of your credit card statement. Don't assume that every tool that you're paying for is being used. Go to that department and ask them, are you still using this? Show me how you're using it. Does it still bring value? Is it worth this cost? Can we shift it someplace else? Make them accountable for it, make them part of the decision-making. And, and if you give them a budget, that makes it even, easier for them to stay within your budget. But even if they're under your budget, that doesn't mean that you need to spend the money if you're not using the product.
Those are great points. We just have like 15 minutes left, and I know you still have 2 more points, so I'll stop asking questions.
Okay, this is an important one, and so I'll try to rush through it, but it's very important. So transferring your knowledge, okay, it's one of the most important things that you have to do as a leader in order to help your company grow. I always talk about try as hard as you can to clone yourself, because you have a vision, you have a way that you want to run your company. And, if you've done already successfully, like I have in the past, you want people to think and talk and act like you, and it also helps create some consistency. One of my proudest moments, this happened recently with Megan, is when she comes in, and I've had this happen a few times, like, hey, people are starting to say that I sound like you. I'm like, yes, I've done it. Because the messaging is going to be consistent, right? That's number one. I think, when you have consistent messaging, about your brand, about your leadership style, about, the value system that you have in your organization, and you're transferring that down through your leadership team, there's not going to be any conflicting messages. Teach the why and not just the how. Again, to clone yourself, you have to help people understand your thought process. And how you go down the path to making decisions, and how you go down the path. And I have this thing called the forks, where I help, I want to eliminate the possibility of mistakes, the whole Murphy's Law, what can happen will happen. And so as we're going down a path and we say, okay, well, here's a point where this can happen and this can happen and this can happen, well, let's put roadblocks in place so that way we prevent those from happening. We're steering the ship towards a path of success. And that's, it gets a little bit more detailed than that, but that's how I explain my thought process, and specifically when we're doing detailed activities. But break it down to the micro detail. And, I talk about, don't worry about overwhelming. And Megan, you could probably attest to this. I just waterboard people with information, and I tell them, don't worry about it. I'm going to repeat this 100 times. So at some point, it's just learning by osmosis. I always think of that Garfield poster in school, but we're just going to continue giving you this information. At some point it's going to click, and you do it enough times for enough hours, you're going to start to absorb that knowledge. And what you want to do is you want to have that knowledge also transfer down. So there's a saying, you're not promotable if you're not replaceable. Some people hoard knowledge because they want job security. They feel like I'm the only person that can do this job. So yeah, I know people don't like me, but I'm going to have a job because nobody else can do it. Well, to me, you're a liability. If nobody else knows how to do your job, then something's wrong. Because if you get sick, if you decide to quit, then our organization is screwed, and I won't put my organization in that sort of peril. So we have to create some level of redundancy. And again, the more we open up your time, the more somebody else can do your job, then the more I can give you stuff that I'm doing. It becomes, you're promoting, everybody's, moving up the totem pole, including you as the owner. my ultimate goal is to not have to come into work. So in order for me to do that, I have to trust the people that are doing the job exactly the way I would want it done. And, so when you get into more of the operational things, it's important that you build out your standard operating procedures and you have them someplace where it's organized. We use a tool called Trainual, and it allows you to build out your operating procedures as well as your policies, but also it becomes your LMS, your learning management system. It's how you train people. It's another way to create redundancy, because again, we live in unfortunately a society right now that the attrition rates are just skyrocketing. And to train somebody new every other month, especially in a skilled position, gets very costly. So have some place where you're storing all of those operating procedures, you're recording them, and then you're also updating them periodically, whether it's once a month. I think that's maybe too frequent, but at least once a quarter. Make sure that those are up to date. I want to leave time for the last topic. So was there any questions about transferring your knowledge?
Nope.
I do have a question just basically about like management styles. How do you like categorize what kind of learner one of your direct reports is, and then how do you utilize their skills the best?
It's a great question. It's a very challenging one. It's again, you want to, people are somewhat malleable, but you're right. There's usually a style. They have a certain personality type, to ask somebody to be a coach when they've never coached, before, and they don't even know how to coach. And, Megan is somebody that I've taken under my wing, and, and I wanted to groom her. She's everything that I'm looking for in an executive type role. And so we hired her an assistant, and I taught her. I didn't teach her assistant. I taught her how to teach that assistant. And it wasn't something that she's comfortable with, but we're constantly coaching. People can learn things. So, when when she delivers something that Cassidy did, and I'm like, okay, well, this isn't wrong. Let me explain to you how to explain it to her. And here are ways that you can talk to her and you can motivate her and you can encourage her. So teaching them techniques, it's not always about changing their style, but maybe it's just about techniques. How to identify what sort of style they are, just ask them, what are you comfortable doing? What kind of leadership do you think, leadership style do you have? Not everybody's built to be a leader, so, sometimes you want to keep them, where they're strongest. A leadership position doesn't always mean a promotion, it could actually damage your company. So be careful when you assign people leadership positions.
Well, thank you.
Yep. All right, we've got how much more time? 10 minutes?
10 minutes, yes.
Okay. We'll do this last one here. It's actually a good transition here when we talk about leadership. My next point, or my final point here, is build your hierarchy. And we were talking to startups here and founders. And one of the things that I found that early on, in almost all of my startups, especially my early ones, where I remember being very, very involved, just like I am with ZIZO now, you're in the trenches with everyone, and, you're building and developing relationships with these people, which is very, very important. I think to motivate people, to get people, especially in a startup, engaged, you have to have a level playing field where everybody's just doing whatever is required to do so, or to build the company up. And what happens is, those personal relationships become dangerously close to becoming, or those business relationships become dangerously close to becoming a personal relationship. Now, when I use the term dangerous, it makes it sound like it's a bad thing. And, it's not a bad thing. But there are dangers that come with managing. It's like hiring a family member or hiring a friend. It's very different. Accountability is more difficult, when you're working with a friend or working with a family member. Terminations, forget about it. I mean, you know how hard it is to fire a friend or a family member? I've done it, and it's not easy. And it's something that I don't want to do. And so, and then also on the other side of things, people take advantage of personal relationships. You know, if you're out the night before, you know, and you're all drinking, you know, you're disciplined enough to get up early, go to work, you know, you have your, you know, work hard, play hard, but got to go to work. And then they call in, they're like, hey, dude, man, last night I'm not feeling it. You know, you were with them or her, and you're just saying, hey, I can't come into work today. What are you going to do? You know, when you have those personal relationships, when there's no clear line in the sand that, hey, look, when we're at work, there's roles here, and everybody's accountable and everybody's responsible. And my job is to hold you accountable. And if they have a problem respecting that and appreciate that, then they don't really belong with the organization. And what winds up happening is, you know, you start to compromise the business objectives. Again, I'm looking at worst case scenario. So my whole analogy of the forks in the road, this is one of those processes like, hey, what can happen? And it will happen. And this is one of them. So one of my, you know, ways to close that path is to say, okay, let's build the hierarchy. Let's not have me be responsible and accountable for everybody, you know. And so you build your hierarchy and you reduce, you know, your direct reports, right? And we talk about using a pyramid or triangle structure. And what that does is it helps minimize layers and, you know, and power struggles. I'm personally, I hate titles. I know that they're required. I think in startups is very dangerous. And that's a whole nother topic entirely. But your job is to create a hierarchy where people have their direct reports and they're accountable for those individuals. And it minimizes your responsibility to work and hold so many people accountable. But you want to remain accessible, especially early stage. You know, you want to know your team. And you want to always keep your finger on the pulse, meaning you want to understand who's doing what their responsibilities are. You know, if there's something personal happening in their life, maintain that relationship, because that is a good culture to have, a friendly culture. And we talk about it here all the time. Hey, we're like a family. You know, we take care of each other. We care about each other. But when we're at work, everybody has a job to do. You know, and everybody understands that. Even me, I'm responsible and accountable to the organization. I work for the organization. My job is to hold you accountable. And so if people don't understand that, and you know that hierarchy isn't in place, and you create that separation, things could get ugly. So that's, you know, why I believe it's important to build it, you know, especially if you're planning on growing, you want to have that separation. But again, accessibility. Any questions?
My question to that would be like, in your experience, what is like the max number of direct reports you felt comfortable with?
It all depends on the size of your organization. In terms of the max, I think one of the ways, if you look at org charts, you know, it's usually departments, right? So if you're at the top level, your CEO, you know, you're looking at all of the other officers reporting up to you, or you're at the same layer as the officers, but you're working together. And then you have your marketing department, you have your accounting department, you have your operations. You know, if you're in development, you have your technology department. So you have your directors or your leaders, your VPs, whatever your title system is. You know, those should be the only direct reports that you're working with. If you're only 2 departments, or if you're only 5 people, you definitely don't want 5 departments. So, you know, the smaller the organization, the more difficult it is to build a hierarchy. And again, there's the whole idea of power struggles where, hey, me and you were the same. Now you're my boss. And, you know, so that's part of the challenge. So you keep as little layers as possible, so that more and more people stay on the same levels. And again, there is no power struggle. And again, I talk about it here. Hey, we're all on the same level. We just have roles. And so we treat each other with respect, with professionalism, you know, and that's number one. You know, nobody plays power moves here. And that's another thing that you have to do. You got to lead by example. If you're a leader, don't be a boss, be a coach, you know, and teach your leaders how to also become coaches. not bosses. Bosses are outdated. It's just leadership.
And do you have any like books that you would recommend for all of these points?
For hierarchy or for all of the?
All of it.
I would say instead of books, just put in the time. For now, I mean, there's a lot of books, and I can't find one particular books. Again, Good to Great, I think, was probably had the biggest impact on me, and personally, because for me, everybody has a ton of ideas, right? And so which idea is better than the other ones? With Good to Great and with Jim Collins it was empirically driven. I'm a data guy, show me data, show me the proof. And so when they set out to address a specific topic, they would do a ton of research. I think it took them 5 years to write the book. And their first chapter was all about, hey, here's how we came up with our data. And they laid out their scientific system. And they said, we will never present to you an opinion. We will just present to you facts. And here are the facts on all of the successful companies, and here are the facts versus the comparison company. And, from a leadership style to the different operationals, how to build your team, how to get the right people in the right seats on the bus, and how to, remove them. All of those things really were very impactful for me. So if I were to say one book, I would say read Good to Great by Jim Collins.
And then we have 2 more questions over here, and that'll probably be the wrapping up. So Sean just asked, any advice on equity distributions at the early stages and later stages of a company?
I'm assuming he's talking about an employee pool. So in terms of equity distributions, Sean, if you want to clarify that, but I'll talk about that while we're waiting for that clarification. I definitely.
I just added, Sean, you can actually talk now if you want to clarify.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, Jimmy, I just, equity pools, but I guess more specifically, when you are just starting off and you might not have that equity pool formed, so you have early employees that you might even want to call co-founders. How did you deal with them?
I built another presentation earlier. We talked about partnerships at length, and I was like, let me scratch that because it has a negative connotation. Partnerships are difficult. Co-founders are a difficult thing to really. I mean, if it's your company and you start up, if they made a financial investment as part of helping start the company up, I think that conversation should have been had before any money was invested. But if it's your company and you're paying them a salary, I think the only thing that, from my perspective only, is that you owe them, unless they're taking a huge cut to be part of the organization, then you can give them kind of co-founder equity. And again, that's something that's negotiated. Otherwise, if they're getting fair market value for what they're doing, and maybe putting in a little bit more effort, maybe because they're early stage, or early employees, you want to incentivize them to stay with you for the long haul. I would definitely create an employee pool and then have a vesting period. So they don't automatically get it, because they need to vest over 3-4 years with a 1-year cliff, meaning that they have to be there for 1 year before they start earning, investing their shares. I don't think you should automatically assume that anybody that starts, when you started, should get equity distributions as in terms of shares. Now, if you're talking about profit sharing as a bonus, that's a completely different conversation, where you're saying, look, we're making money, and I'm going to put a chunk of that money, let's just say 20% of the profits, and we're going to split that 4 ways. That's very different. And I would do that before even giving away actual shares in the company, because they feel like, hey, they're participating in the success of the company and getting, a profit share, not a revenue share. But you don't have to actually give away equity in the company. Does that answer your question, Sean?
It did. Thank you.
That leads us also into our next question. Adam just asked, any suggestions for early stage startups when prioritizing / choosing the first few key hires or co-founders?
Yeah, this is important, and I think number one, you got to match, I think, some of your core values. I think it's important that your core values are aligned, only because if you live different lifestyles, if you have different core values, it's probably not going to take long before your vision for the company is going to change as well. I think, if you're aligned on a personal level, it helps keep you aligned on the business level. I find that, and this is in no way a biased statement, but I enjoy hiring people with families. People with families have responsibility, are accountable, they have something to work towards. When you're younger, that's going to be hard to do. And that actually becomes a challenge as you guys are growing together, because if you're in your early 20s and nobody has families, and then one person starts a family, it starts to shift priorities as well. But if to get priority, what I would say is make sure that your values are aligned, that the vision is also aligned, and then there's some sort of contract in place in terms of what the direction the company is going to go. In terms of what position to hire, that's all going to depend on the operation and what you guys are looking to build. So for me, my first hire at ZIZO was a CTO. Okay, somebody who's going to build my development team and help me build my vision, and manage that whole process, so that I can focus on the business side of things. I was still the innovator, I was still the architect, but I would be able to hand that over and he can manage the whole thing. So that was for me. And then my next big hire was Megan. She just wore every other hat in the organization.
Thank you guys so much for presenting. This was ZIZO Technologies. Again, Jimmy Chebat, founder, and then Megan, who wears many hats. So again, thank you guys for everything that you did for Buffalo Startup Week, and we'll see you guys later today with Dan Mag's Fireside Chat.
Awesome.
Bye, guys.